Today is axle replacement day. I'm going to try and do this tutorial doing this in your garage and then out on the trail, which I've never done before, admittedly, but hopefully these tips will work. First thing you want to do is, if you have the tailgate extender, take that off, because it'll give you more clearance and you won't bump your head working underneath here. You want to drain your rear differential oil, and I've got videos on how to do that. Out in the field, you know, that's a judgment call. It's just one axle you're replacing, and you can get the side you're replacing high enough. You might not lose much rear diff oil, but if you have a 2-liter bottle or a small water bottle to collect the oil so you can save it before you lose it when removing the axle, you might want to do that. The other thing is while your suspension is loaded, you want to remove your lower caliper retaining bolts, because once you jack this thing in the air, your suspension arms are going to droop and it's going to be more difficult to remove those. Once you remove your knuckle, you can get them out, but it's easiest to remove this lower caliper bolt while the suspension is loaded. I'm running max stock preload, so you may need to use a ratchet strap to compress the suspension just a little bit more. And luckily my socket has a squared end, so I can just take my 17mm and put it over my Milwaukee bit to get that broken loose. Once it's broken loose, you have to remove it by hand. So there's barely enough clearance there to get that bolt out. So to show you where I strapped it down. You want to deal it up here because you'll bend the frame. So after jacking the rear of your vehicle up and then removing your tires, you want to get this 14mm upper caliber bolt, bottom's also 14mm, and remove these two 10mm brake line nuts. And just hang the caliper out of your way. If you can, disconnect your sway bar link. It'll make it easier, especially if you're only doing one axle, to move this lower control arm up and down. So next you want to remove the axle nut. OEM and some of the aftermarket, they use a nut that's peened to a notch here. You want to peen that back if possible. If not, if you have a powerful enough impact, it'll remove it, but if you can, peen that back so it doesn't have to fight that extra force. This is a 32mm nut. Next you're going to remove the upper knuckle bolt. Front bolt's 17mm, back is 19. At this point, you want to have some bungee cords or some hanging wire on hand, because you're going to have to hold components out of the way. You want to remove your upper shock mount bolt. You could do the lower. I find the upper easier to do. The reason being is because this shock spring is going to interfere with you raising the upper A-arm. So I've already loosened this. You also want to disconnect your IQS electrical connector if you have it. And then kind of support that out of the way. Okay, so there's a lot going on here. I have my shock supported, so it's far enough from the upper A-arm that it doesn't cause binding when you're trying to raise and lower the upper A-arm. Your upper A-arm you want pretty much horizontal. And the reason being is if it's not, and you're pulling that axle out, you try and pull that angle, you're going to break something. You want to pull the axle straight out. And to do that, support your A-arm with a bungee or wire. I went ahead and found some appropriate sized wood, jammed it in there, so that's holding the A-arm pretty much horizontal. All right. I have a pry bar here, which I'm going to use to pull the axle out of the hub. Now, some people use this to pull the axle out of the diff, which you can do it that way, but you really don't want to do it at this angle. If you're going to use this hub as a slide hammer, you want to remove it from the lower A-arm and pull it straight out. But the better way to remove this axle from the outer hub is to take a rubber mallet and hammer from this end and push it inwards, and this is just to hold the hub in place while I'm doing that. There you go. So this is probably the most important part of pulling the axle. Use your bungee cord to support it. So you want to pull it straight out. If you pull that at an angle, that's when you break stuff. You want to pull at the very minimum from the shaft. If you can pull at the cup, that's better, because that's going to put less stress on everything. So you want to pull straight out, and this cord supporting it is going to help you pull straight out. There it came out. Okay, it should come out that easy. Now, in my previous video, I used the tree felling wedge. If you have to use a lot of force to where you're thinking you're going to damage that cup, that's the route I would go. So now's a good opportunity to clean your seals, and I coat mine with Tink Seal, both on the outer lip as well as the inside lip. And then I'll do the splines on the hub here. If you're doing both axles, now's the time to remove the other axle, because you can hammer it with a piece of wood from the inside, which will make your job a lot easier and prevent any possible damage to the bearing cup versus removing it the conventional way. So having plastic coated wire on hand is really nice. Just 2 pieces of wires holding the shock, A-arm horizontal, and holding my axle in place. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to take a piece of wood, my rubber dowel, hammer from that side, and push this axle out. So installing your axle, you want to support it at both ends. I have a piece of foam here, and I'm supporting it with the wire at the other end. Insert it, and you should be able to feel the splines engage, and right there they engaged. And that's it. Okay. Now, gently tug on it, and it shouldn't come back out. You know that C-clip's engaged. This is where a ratchet strap helps. I have lead my shock outwards so I can raise my lower A-arm up, and I just have a long nail 10 spike to hold the upper knuckle with the upper A-arm. I have my shaft splines through the hub, and now I'm going to install my hub on the splines. And notice I'm hitting it all around the hub. Let's see if I can get a few turns on the castle nut. And you can just use the castle nut to pull it all the way on if it's not binding. So then I'm going to try and get this bolt on. There we go. So getting your top shock bolt back in can be a little hard. You can reduce your preload to max, which is tedious. I use one of these to compress it down, and then once it was in the bracket, I was able to use this to get my nail in there, and then we'll see if I can successfully get this bolt. Then just torque everything to spec. Easy way to remember is 60 foot-pounds, 90 foot-pounds. You know, it's going to be like 92, but I think it's close to 60 and 90. And then just ugga-dugga that, because you're not going to have a torque wrench to be able to get that to proper specs. The nice thing about these Demon axles is they have a cotter pin. No more having to pin it in place.